Let's discuss brief experimental analysis, or BEA. What is a BEA, and who is it for? A BEA is a methodology that helps educators identify the intervention or combination of interventions that leads to the largest gains in the target academic skill. Consider this quote: a BEA manipulates environmental variables or instructional variables by implementing a series of interventions and assessing the immediate effect on a particular outcome. Once identified, that intervention or combination of interventions is implemented over an extended period of time. The BEA is a functional analysis of academic performance. You've probably heard of FBAs, or functional behavioral analysis, which is a methodology used by educators to determine the function of a behavior, typically a problem behavior such as calling out or avoidance behaviors such as leaving the room. The FBA systematically analyzes the antecedents and consequences that stimulate and reinforce that behavior in order to determine the behavior's function. Well, the BEA extends the logic of the functional analysis to analyzing academic difficulties. Some of the similarities between functional analysis of academic performance and FBAs is that you review multiple sources of data to generate hypotheses as to why the learning difficulty is occurring. Then you manipulate antecedents like providing think aloud modeling and consequences like providing reinforcers or performance feedback to systematically investigate the effects on the academic behavior. This allows you to test hypotheses with appropriate intervention methods. A quick note on functional analysis and what's meant by that term. Functional analysis differs from something called structural analysis because functional analysis focuses on variables like antecedents and consequences that may be manipulated, whereas structural analysis focuses on variables that cannot be manipulated, such as intelligence or processing disorders or disability types. Those things are stable and cannot be influenced by changing the antecedent or the consequence. So who is the BEA for? Educators can use the BEA for students with disabilities, students with intensive learning needs, and students who have not responded to primary Tier 1 or secondary Tier 2 interventions. What are the benefits of BEA? First, BEA allows for test driving interventions. BEA enables you to test drive the intervention before implementation in an extended analysis. In other words, a Tier 3 intervention. Note the difference between brief analysis and extended analysis. Brief analysis is meant to be a quick test drive of different interventions, whereas the actual intervention chosen is implemented for several weeks within Tier 3. Trying out multiple interventions in a brief experiment to select the one with the highest likelihood of working, rather than selecting an intervention on instinct or based on general evidence of its effectiveness. Remember, just because an evidence-based practice is shown to be effective in general doesn't mean that that practice will be effective for your given student. So, if we select the optimum intervention for that student the first time around, rather than after several weeks of trying out less effective interventions, this ultimately saves time and helps students close the gap quicker. Second, BEA is a data-driven approach. Often, special educators, school psychologists, and general education teachers who are part of the problem-solving team will come up with different but equally viable alternatives for intervention. BEA allows you to experiment and test multiple hypotheses and interventions, selecting the one with the most promise for extended implementation in Tier 3. This helps to avoid arguments among professionals and keeps the attention on the student. because data is driving the judgment. Finally, BEA is research-based. Interventions are typically selected to correspond to a conceptual framework, and we've discussed the frameworks of the can't do, won't do assessment, Daly's hypotheses, and the instructional hierarchy. Students' response to an intervention provides data as to their underlying reasons for academic difficulties because the interventions are tied to those conceptual frameworks. And finally, and most importantly, research has shown that interventions selected using BEA are more effective at improving behavioral and learning problems than interventions selected based on general alignment with the problem area or based on professional judgment. In sum, BEA is a systematic scientific process. It relies on a functional analysis of academic deficits. And when used correctly, the BEA can help educators test drive interventions, saving time and helping make interventions more effective for those students with the most intensive learning needs.